You are taught that everything which happens has a cause, that the world runs on iron chains of cause and effect, each event, the unavoidable result of the one before it, all the way back to the beginning. It is the deepest and most unexamined assumption of the modern mind, so deep that most people have never once thought to question it. And it is not the whole truth. There is a crack in that great law, and through the crack, something else gets in. Tonight, Jung is going to show you that crack, because once you see it, you will understand that the strangest experiences of your life, the ones you have been told to dismiss as mere coincidence, may not be accidents at all, but the visible edge of a second principle at work in the world, one the modern age forgot, and one that quietly addresses itself to you. Let him begin with the law as you were taught it, the law that has ruled the Western mind for 2 centuries. It is the law of causality. Every effect has a cause. Strike the ball, and it moves. Heat the water, and it boils. Nothing happens by itself. Nothing happens without a reason, and if you only knew all the causes, you could, in principle, predict everything that will ever occur. This idea became so powerful, so total, that it turned the whole universe into a vast machine, an endless chain of causes and effects grinding forward with no gaps and no surprises. And science, riding on the back of this idea, achieved such miracles that nobody dared question it. Causality became not just a law, but a dogma, the one and only way that one thing can be connected to another. But here is what almost no one outside the laboratories was told. In the last century, the deepest science of all, the science of the very small, broke that dogma open from the inside. The physicists who went down into the world of the tiniest particles discovered something that should have shaken every thinking person alive. Down there, at the very bottom of matter, in the world of the smallest things, the iron law of cause and effect stops working as a strict command. The particles do not obey. You cannot predict what a single one of them will do. The great laws of nature, it turned out, are not absolute commandments that every event must obey. They are statistical truths. They are averages. They hold when you are dealing with vast numbers of things, the way you can predict how a huge crowd will behave without knowing what any single person will do. But for the single case, the small quantity, the individual event, the law becomes uncertain and prediction fails. Sit with what that means, because it changes everything. If the laws of nature are only statistically true, only true on average, then they are not without exceptions. An average is made of exceptions. And that means there must exist, woven through the world, events that do not fit the causal chain at all, events for which cause and effect is simply not the explanation. The iron law has a crack in it, and the crack was there all along. And here is the deception buried inside the statistical view, the thing that keeps people from seeing the crack. Statistics gives you the average and then quietly persuades you that the average is the world. But the average is not the world. The average is an abstraction, a picture with all the exceptions scrubbed out of it. Think of it this way. If someone tells you the average stone in a riverbed weighs a certain amount, they have told you something true and something false at once, because there is, in fact, no average stone. Every actual stone is heavier or lighter than the average, and the average itself is a thing that exists nowhere in the river. The statistical picture of the world is exactly like this. It is smooth, regular, lawful, and it is missing precisely the rare, the unique, the exceptional events, the ones that do not fit, which it has quietly discarded in order to produce its tidy average. And it is in those thrown away exceptions, the events too rare to fit the curve, that the second principle hides. If you have ever had an experience so strangely timed, so meaningfully placed, that something in you insisted it could not be mere chance, even as your educated mind told you it must be, then you have stood at the edge of that crack, and you should stay with Jung, because what comes to it is the thing he spent his life studying. Subscribe and stay with him, because once you understand the second principle, you will never see the events of your life the same way again. So let Jung lead you into the crack at the thing we have all agreed to call chance, a coincidence, an accident, Two things that happen together with, we assume, no real connection between them. Now, most coincidences truly are just that, the ordinary churning of countless events, and now and then, two of them line up by pure probability. Jung was never a superstitious man, and he would never tell you to read meaning into every accident. But here is the question. The dogma of causality forbids us even to ask, what if some of these coincidences are not caused at all, and yet are still connected? Not by cause and effect, but by something else entirely. That something else is meaning. This is the second principle, the one the modern world buried. Two events, with no possible causal link between them, no force passing from one to the other, no chain of cause and effect joining them, and yet they fall together in the same moment, and they share the same meaning. A symbol rises in your dream during the night, and the next morning the same symbol walks into your waking life. You think with sudden force of a person you have not seen in years, and within the hour they call, or a letter from them arrives. Something inside you knows a thing it could not possibly have learned, and then the outer world confirms it. In each case there is no cause connecting the inner event and the outer one, but there is a meaning connecting them, a meaning so exact that to call it accident feels like a lie. Jung once described an experience from his own life exactly as it happened, so you could see how these things actually arrive. On a single morning he made a note of an old inscription that spoke of a man as a fish. At lunch that same day, fish was served, and someone happened to mention an old custom of making an April fish of a person. That afternoon, a former patient he had not seen in months showed him paintings of fish he had made. In the evening, he was shown an embroidery of fish-like sea monsters. And the next morning, another patient he had not seen in years told him a dream in which he stood on the shore and a great fish swam toward her and landed at her feet. 6 fishes in the space of a day, while he himself was deep in a study of the fish as a symbol, and only one of those people knew anything about his work. Jung was the first to admit it may have been chance. Fish on a Friday is common, but the impression it made on him was not the impression of an accident. It had a quality to it, a meaningfulness that mere probability does not wear, and he learned to take that quality seriously rather than explain it away. And notice what you actually do when this happens to you, because it reveals how deep the dogma runs. The experience strikes you. Something in you says, clearly, this is not mere chance. And then, almost at once, your trained modern mind steps in and talks you out of it. It must be coincidence, you tell yourself. There must be some cause I am not seeing. You override your own direct experience because you have been taught that the only real connection between two things is a causal one, and anything that does not fit that mold must be dismissed as nothing. You have been trained to disbelieve the evidence of your own life, and you should ask yourself why the modern mind clings so desperately to the dogma that causality is everything. The answer, Jung believed, is control. If every event has a cause, then in principle every event can be known, predicted, and mastered. A universe of pure cause and effect is a universe a person can hope to dominate, to engineer, to bend to their will, because it has no real surprises in it, only puzzles waiting to be solved. The second principle threatens that dream. Meaning cannot be engineered. A meaningful coincidence cannot be manufactured on demand or harnessed like a machine. It comes when it comes, unbidden, outside your control, and that is intolerable to an age that has sticked everything on control. So, the modern mind does not reject the second principle because the evidence is weak. It rejects it because the second principle cannot be commanded, and an age in love with power would rather deny a thing exists than admit there is something real it cannot rule. Jung wanted to be careful and honest here, because this is exactly where lesser minds go wrong. He was not asking you to throw causality away. It is real. It rules most of the world, most of the time, and without it there would be no science, no medicine, no understanding of nature at all. He was not handing you a license to see secret meaning in every spilled cup and missed train, to fall back into a childish world where nothing is ever accidental and everything is a sign. That way lies foolishness, and worse, what he asks is something far more modest and far more difficult. He asks you to stop treating causality as the whole of reality, to accept that it is one principle, a mighty one, but not the only one, and to make room beside it for a second principle equal in rank that connects events not by cause but by meaning. For when you do that, your whole picture of your own life changes. You begin to see that your life is woven of two different kinds of threads. There are the causal chains, the ordinary connections of cause and effect that carry you through your days, the reasons things happen, the long lines of consequence you can trace and understand. And then there are the other threads, the cross connections, the moments when two things fall together, not because one caused the other, but because they share a meaning, and these threads run crossways through the causal ones, binding distant parts of your life together in a pattern that no chain of cause and effect could ever produce. And the strangest thing about these cross connections is that they do not behave like causes at all. A cause must travel. It needs time to pass from one thing to the next, and its power fades with distance, growing weaker the farther it must reach. But the meaningful coincidence pays no such tolls. The inner event and the outer one can be separated by great distances and still fall together perfectly, as though the space between them were nothing. They can even be separated in time, the inner knowing arriving before the outer event has occurred. No force we know behaves this way. Nothing that must obey cause and effect can leap across space without weakening, or reach across time before the event exists, which is the clearest sign of all that we are not dealing with some hidden cause we have simply failed to find. We are dealing with a different kind of connection altogether, one that meaning makes and that cause and effect cannot. And here is why this matters to you beyond all the philosophy. A life seen only through causality is a machine. It is a long chain of one thing pushing the next, with no meaning anywhere in it, because a machine does not mean anything, it merely runs. That is the world the modern age handed you, and it is why so many people, surrounded by every comfort, feel that their lives are accidental, empty, addressed to no one. But a life that also contains the second principle is not a machine at all. It is shot through with meaning, with moments that seem aimed, placed, intended, as though the world itself were occasionally speaking to you in a language older than cause and effect. Those are the moments, are they not, when you have felt most certain that your life was not a random accident, but somehow meant. And Jung will tell you something that may surprise you. This second principle is not his invention. It is in fact far older than the dogma of causality that buried it. For most of human history, in nearly every civilization, people took it for granted that the events of the world were bound together not only by cause but by meaning, that the inner and the outer corresponded, that a pattern ran through all things connecting them in a web of significance. They explained it crudely with talk of omens and sympathies and magic, and much of that was indeed superstition. But underneath the crude explanations lay a genuine perception, a true intuition that the modern age threw out along with the superstition, the way one might throw out a living child with a dirty bathwater. The perception was real. Events are bound by meaning as well as by cause. We did not discover this. We forgot it and are only now, by the strangest of roads, beginning to remember. So Jung leaves you with the question that opens the crack in the law. You have spent your whole life being told that every connection between two things must be a chain of cause and effect, and that everything else is mere meaningless chance. But what if that law is only half the truth? What if there runs through your life a second kind of connection, a binding of events not by cause but by meaning? And what if the strangest, most meaningful moments you have ever lived were never accidents at all, but the second principle quietly making itself known to you? If tonight you understood that coincidence may not be what you were taught it was, then write 3 words in the comments. Write not just chance, Jung wants to know how many of you have felt the second principle at work in your own life in some perfectly timed, perfectly meaningful moment and were told by everyone around you to call it nothing at all. And stay for the next video. Because if events can be connected by meaning rather than cause, then the deepest question becomes this: how does something inside you come to know a thing it could never have learned through your senses, a death far away, a danger not yet arrived, a truth it had no way of reaching? That knowledge has a source, and what that source is will be the next door.